Good morning, everybody. We are ready to continue on in our story about Aeneas. The we are reading in classic myths to read aloud. It is the last section of the Aeneid, and Aeneas, in this particular section of the Aeneid, he is going to visit the lower world. My hair's sticking out. Weird is that? In this story that we're going to read, and it's probably a 15-minute story, Aeneid goes on to tell the story itself, the Aeneid, goes on to tell about Aeneas's eventual conquering of the tribes that inhabit Italy. Now, remember, Aeneas, I keep saying that he is a man from um, Troy. Is that what they call Trojans? He's a man from Troy. Let's just say he's a man from Troy. And it was predicted by Roman mythology that Italy would eventually be inhabited by people from the city of Troy, so that descendants of Aeneas would eventually inhabit Italy, and then they would then give birth, so to speak, to the country and the culture of Rome through the line of Romulus and Remus. If you remember that from our last section that we read in the Aeneid. So this section is prior to that. This tale of his journey, it says he goes to Hades, and it provides a very colorful and an imaginative point of departure. So Virgil, who is the author of the Aeneid, his vision of how earthly lives are punished or rewarded after death was intended to encourage his readers towards more moral behavior. So he put this section in his story because he wanted people to act better. He wanted their behavior to improve because he wanted to scare them with the possibility of an afterlife that was not very pleasant. Whether it had that result, whether or not this story has that result is unknown, but the images that he creates in his vision have been recreated by many other authors for centuries. And they are also the basis for many references and allusions today. Okay, let's go ahead and begin. If you are following along in the physical copy of this book, it is page 256. If you are following along in the PDF copy, it is called Aeneas Visits the Lower World. The storm that Aeneas and the Trojans encountered after leaving Carthage raged for several days, buffeting the ships about and washing huge waves across the decks. In the darkest hours of the tempest, Aeneas's aged father, Aeneas, died in his sleep. And Aeneas, overcome with grief, embraced his father's lifeless body and wept uncontrollably for many hours. When at last the storm abated, that means when it stopped, Aeneas ordered the ships to depart from their original course, which was off to Italy, and to put in at the nearby island of Sicily. Wait, what? Sicily is part of Italy. Aeneas did not really know that at that time. Italy is the peninsula. Sicily is an island that is considered part of the country of Italy, so that Aeneas could be given a proper burial. Once on the shore, Aeneas called his people together and said, "This is a day that we shall always keep in sorrow and in reverence, and it is fitting that we celebrate it with the proper rites." And so they built a tomb for Aeneas and then proceeded to honor him in the manner that befitted great men of the time. They all crowned their heads with myrtle wreaths and held a great feast. Myrtle is a kind of plant. And then they joined in athletic contests featuring ship races and tests of running, boxing, and archery skill. That was their version of a funeral. Not really like ours. Swords and garments and jewels were given as prizes to the winners. And these funeral games went on for 9 days. 9. On the last night of the celebration, as Aeneas slept soundly in his tent, he was visited by the ghost of his father in a dream. Aeneas heard his father say to him, "My son, the great Jove wishes me to tell you many things about your journey to Italy. But first you must visit me where I dwell, in Pluto's dark domains. Fear not, that I am tortured with the evildoers, for I am at peace in Elysium, in the company of the blessed. The Sibyl will show you how to find me, and then you shall learn of your glorious future and of the city that you are to build. Till then, my son, farewell. The vision in the dream vanished like smoke into the air, and Aeneas awoke with a start. He called to him his friends and his captains, and he told them about what Jove had commanded him to do. Straightway they set sail for the land of Comi, where the Sibyl, who had the power to disclose the future, lived in a dark and hidden cave near the temple of Apollo. And when their boats were anchored at last along the shore, several of the Trojans went into the forest to cut firewood and to find fresh water. Others hunted for whatever game the countryside might provide. Aeneas, though, went alone to find the cave of Sibyl. He located Apollo's temple easily enough, and as he stared at it, wondering which direction to go next, he heard a strange voice, or voices perhaps, nearby, and he walked on to see from what source they were coming. All of a sudden, he was at the mouth of a cave that was cut out of solid rock. And as he stepped just inside, he could see that it was very deep and spacious, with 100 doors, out of which rushed the many voices of Sibyl. Though his knees trembled and the cold shudders ran through his bones, Aeneas offered a prayer to the prophetess, saying, O great Sibyl, grant me the power to descend to the lower regions and to hear the message that is intended for my ears, and my people will honor you forever. The 100 doors flew open with a blast, and a voice from each bellowed with a reply. Son of Acheses, it is easy to go down to the land of the shades, but to retrace one step and reach the upper air again, this is not so light a task. Only if you have done it. But if you are still of a mind to try, listen to my words. There lies hidden in the forest a bough of gold, which is sacred to Proserpine, the queen of the dead. Proserpine. No one can go upon this journey unless he brings with him the bough as a gift to the queen. You're saying, what is a bough? Because when you think of a bough, you think of a bough. That's not the bough they're talking about. This is spelled differently. It's spelled with off, aw, ow. It's spelled with that phonogram. And a bough is, for lack of a better description, it's a piece of a plant. A piece of a plant. Oops, I lost my spot. All the doors suddenly slammed shut, and an eerie silence was all that filled the deep, dark cave. Aeneas searched the forest high and low, but he could find nothing like a bough of gold. Then a pair of doves swooped down from the sky and settled on some grassy turf near where Aeneas was walking. Almost in despair, he called out to them, If only you could be my guides, for with your lofty views you must know where the golden bough is hidden. Then the birds rode into the air and circled Aeneas's head several times before flying very slowly ahead of him. He followed their lead, and with minutes they alighted upon a tree that bore the golden bough. Aeneas gave thanks to the gods for sending these guiding doves, and then he quickly broke off the glittering branch and returned to Sibyl's cave, glad of heart that he now had the means to gain the favor of the Queen of the Dead. When Aeneas arrived back at Sibyl's abode, she appeared to him in her own womanly form, and she asked him again whether he was certain that he wanted to go on. Aeneas replied that he was duty bound to hear his father's message, and so Sibyl led him into the deepest reaches of the cave, past a gloomy lake from which deadly vapors arose. They continued on deeper and deeper into the cave and into the earth. The path was steep and rocky, and the footing uncertain. All about them was the gloom and silence. In the dim light of the single torch that Sibyl carried, shadows looked like contorted faces, and the rocks protruding from the walls of the passageway seemed like arms jutting out to snatch at Aeneas as he passed by. After a great while, they came to the gates of Hades, where the figures of grief and remorse lay sleeping on their beds. There also Aeneas could see the shapes of fear and hunger, formed so horrible that he had to turn his eyes away. Gorgons and harpies and all manners of monsters roamed about the entrance, breathing fire and screeching and gnashing their teeth. That's what gnashing your teeth means. Aeneas drew his sword and would have rushed at them had Sibyl not assured him, but they were but airy aberrations, ferocious but without substance. That means that they didn't really exist. Passing through the gates, they reached a wide stream where the ferryman, Charon by name, stood on the decks of a rusty boat, leaning on a pole. Upon the banks were throngs of souls, wives and mothers and men of war and boys and girls, as thick as leaves that fall to the earth at the first frost of autumn. And all stood stretching out their hands and calling to the ferryman to take them across to the other side. Aeneas was moved by the sight, and he turned to Sibyl, saying, "Oh, lady, tell me why these spirits, who are these spirits, and what do they seek?" And Sibyl replied, "This is the river Styx, and those you see are the souls whose bodies have been left unburied on earth. It is not permitted for spirits to be delivered to their rightful place in the underworld until their bones have been laid to rest. And so they wander to and fro along the shores for 100 years before they are allowed to cross." Aeneas's heart was touched with pity by their sad fortune, and he and Sibyl pressed on through the crowd toward the ferry boat. When Charon saw them coming, he roared out in an angry voice, "Stay back, whoever you are, for this is the abode of ghosts, and no living soul can cross in my boat." But the Sibyl held up the golden bow for the ferryman to see, and he was amazed to behold the marvelous gift, and he laid his anger aside. Without a word more, he brought his boat near the bank, and driving out the ghosts, and he sat in crowds upon it that sat in crowds upon its benches, he took on he took on board Aeneas and the Sibyl. The boat, accustomed only to the light freight of bodiless spirits, groaned under the weight of these living souls, but soon it reached the opposite shore. Here Aeneas beheld another gate, and stretching in front of it lay the three-headed Cerberus, the watchdog of Hades. The air resounded with the fierce barking from his triple throats, and the Sibyl, to quiet him, flung a cake of honey and poppy seeds that would drug him into a sound sleep. Mad with hunger, Sybaris tore at the morsel with his three mouths, and soon his limbs relaxed, and he stretched himself out before the gate, wrapped in the arms of Morpheus, the god of dreams. Aeneas bounded from the ferry boat out upon the shore from which no one could hope to return. As he pressed on through the gate, he could hear the crying of the ghosts of the young children who had died before their lives had scarcely begun. Here, too, were the souls of those who had been tired of life, had sought death by their own hands, and now they were wishing they could return to the earth again. Nearby, amid the groves of myrtle, were the souls of those who had died of love, and among these was Dido, whom Aeneas could see faintly through the shadows. Tears came rushing to his eyes, and he called to her, "Dido, can it be you? Oh, beautiful queen! And can it be then that it was I who sent you here? As God is my witness, I beg you to believe that I did not wish to leave you, but my duty gave me no other course." But she, standing for a moment with her eyes cast to the ground, set her heart against him and abruptly walked away. The Sibyl took him by the hand and led him to the place where the path parted into two roads. "The one on the right," she said, "leads to Pluto's place and to the Elysian fields. But on the left lies the path to Tartarus, 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 that's how you say it, Tartarus, where the wicked of the world are punished for their crimes." Aeneas peeked down the road on the left and saw in the distance a high wall and a river of flames licking at it from below. He could hear the din of the deep groans and the cracking whips and the dragging chains coming from behind the wall, and he asked Sibyl to tell him of the meaning. She answered him, saying, "The feet of the righteous may not pass down that road, but Proserpine has told me of the terrors that are contained in those walls." And the prophetess described to Aeneas the many torments that there afflict those who had done the deepest wrongs to their fellow men on earth. Among the tortures was that of Siphius, the cruel king of Corinth, whose task was to roll a huge stone up a hill. But when the top was nearly reached, the rock would rush headlong down to the plain again. And so he toiled and he toiled while the sweat bathed his weary limbs, but all to no effect. There too was Tantalus, another wicked king, who was condemned for all times to stand in a pool, his chin level with the water. Yet he was parched with thirst, for when he bowed his head to drink, the water receded. Tall trees laden with luscious fruit stooped their branches to him. But just when he reached for their treasures, a sudden wind would raise the branch just above his grasp. There were other torments too, even harsher, but all who had in common is that they would endure them forever and ever without pause, nor was there any hope for those who suffered. Then the Sibyl then advised Aeneas that it was time for him to turn his attention toward the abodes of the blessed, and she led him down the path on the right until it reached the fields of Elysium. Here the air is pure, the skies are bright, and the green of springtime abounds. Some of the happy souls could be seen exercising on the grassy lawn, while others joined in dance and in song. Here Aeneas could see the kings of old who had died for their country, and the priests, and those who had improved the world with their inventions, and those who had worthy deeds and had lessened the suffering of others on earth. Across a shining plain, he beheld Achises, who was stretching his arms out towards his son, tears of joy streaming down his cheeks. Aeneas wrapped his own arms around his father in a loving embrace, but found that he was embracing a phantom. There was no substance within his encircling grasp. Achises then, with a knowing look, comforted his son and assured him that his happiness was not diminished just because his mortal body had been left on earth. They walked along together, and Aeneas asked Achises to identify the souls that they met and to explain why so many were gathered on the banks of the peaceful river that flowed gently across the plain. These souls, Achises answered, all seek to live again in a mortal body. They drink from the river Leith, whose water brings about forgetfulness, and thus they lose all memory of the past, and they may return to the world above in another human form. Achises then went on to tell Aeneas and the Sibyl all of the events that the future held for his son and the race that would be founded by the people of Troy, the Romans. He showed them visions of how Aeneas would land in Italy and conquer the tribes who dwelt there and give them laws and order. The great nation Aeneas would found there would have many heroes and in time would rule the world with imperial sway. He's talking about Rome, the Roman Empire. He told them of Romulus, the founder of the city on the seven hills, of Brutus, the avengers of the country's wrong. Remember Brutus, the friend of Caesar? And of the lines of Caesars who would all plant the Roman way in every foreign land. All this, my son, will come to your children's children, so his descendants. Other civilizations may create great works of art, and some may devote themselves to science, he said. But the work of the nation you shall found is to conquer the world, to set the rule of peace, to spare the humble, and to subdue the proud. So basically, what Achises is telling Aeneas is that the empire of Rome, although other cultures will um, discover scientific things and will create great works of art and science and all of those other things, the purpose of Rome is to establish law. So much of the world bases its current um, government, their current laws, their government in some way on Rome, the Roman and the way that the Roman government was developed in some form. Not, and I'm not saying that they're all republics because they are not by any means, but that the what Achises is telling Aeneas is that the purpose of Rome and of the Trojan people, so who eventually would become the Romans, is to establish law and order and to um, set the precedents, shall we say, for government in the various countries of the world. And so it came to pass, just as Achises had said, that Aeneas conquered the tribes of Italy and brought them under his rule of law. Ascasian ruled the land after him and his children after him. And Romulus founded the greatest city of all on the banks of the Tiber River. And its armies conquered the world and brought a peace that would know no end. But we do know that it was only 200 years of peace. Thus did the seeds of Troy take root and then flower in the Roman Empire. Here's a little more information. The realms of the lower world are rich with imagery and with the ancient visions of hell. They provide the basis of many common words that no longer pertain to the infernal regions at all. Even in the abbreviated tale of Aeneas' subterranean journal, we learn about the waters of forgetfulness that come from the river Lethe, a name that is the root of the word lethargy and lethargic. I'm sorry, it's Lethe, which would now convey the feeling of apathy and listlessness and helplessness, lethargy and lethargic. We see Tantalus being punished, not just by eternal hunger and thirst, but by having food and drink remain nearby, but just outside his grasp. That is little wonder then that the modern word tantalize came to mean teasing and tormenting one with the hopes that remain out of reach. We are led to the peaceful paradise called Elysian Fields, and we understand why the magnificent avenue in Paris bears the French form of this name, let's see if I can remember how to say that. Champs-Élysées. 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 Yeah, Champs-Élysées. As a side note, I've actually been there and I've walked down that road, that avenue. Still another word source that appears in this tale as well as elsewhere in Roman mythology is the name of the god of dreams, Morpheus. It was because of the hypnotic effect of the newly discovered chemical had on patients that a German chemist in 1803 named his drug morphine. Comes from the root Morpheus, from that name. Even the word hypnotic itself comes to us from the Greek name for the god of sleep, hypnos, which is also the root of hypnosis. All right, so that ends our tale of Aeneas. I have just a few questions here. I need to find them. I didn't print them out. I just have them on my computer. Why is Aeneas tasked with going to the underworld? Why did he decide that was something that he needed to do? Exactly. His father came to him in a dream and told him that he needed to meet him there in the underworld, in the lower world they call it, so that he could tell Aeneas about what was going to happen. Who are some of the creatures and the people that he encounters on his voyage? Can you remember any of them? Well, Tantalus we just talked about. He came upon Tantalus. We talked about Charon, the guy, the oarsman. He actually has a pole. The polesman who brings the souls across the river Styx. We also learned about that. We talked about Morpheus and Hypnos. Yeah, we talked about a whole bunch of different characters. According to this particular tale that we just read, what was his purpose of the author in having us visit the underworld? Not Aeneas's purpose to visit the underworld, but this question is saying, why did Virgil write this story? That's what it's asking you. Why did Virgil write this story of Aeneas in the lower worlds? We talked about it before we even began the story. Exactly. His purpose was that so people would read this story and they would come to live better lives when they were still alive, because he wanted people to be better people. He was working on building their character, kind of like we do here at the Classical Academy. He wanted them to live better lives by showing certain character traits: honesty, integrity, perseverance, excellence, honor, those sorts of things, and doing good things for other people, because he truly wanted humans to become better people. And by becoming better people, he thought that he could let them know that they could avoid the tortures of the lower world. Well, that's all I got for you today. You guys have a great week. a weekend. Actually, it's Friday. And I will see you next week. We have finished our tale of Aeneas. We will start on a different classical myth next week. You guys have a great weekend. Bye bye.